There is a version of you that has never existed yet. Not because it isn't possible, not because the capacity isn't there, but because something has been acting as a ceiling quietly, consistently, for longer than you realize. A limit you accepted somewhere along the way without ever consciously choosing it. A boundary that feels like reality, but is actually just a story. And the most dangerous thing about that ceiling is not that it holds you back. It's that after long enough, you stop seeing it. You stop pushing against it. You stop questioning it. You start organizing your life around it, building routines and habits and expectations that fit within its dimensions, never fully realizing that the dimensions themselves were never fixed, that the ceiling was always softer than it looked, that the version of you living just beneath it is not the full version, not even close. This video is about what lives above that ceiling, about what it actually means to unleash the potential you have been carrying without fully using, about what it takes specifically and honestly to become the kind of person that difficulty cannot stop, that setbacks cannot define, that the weight of ordinary life cannot hold permanently in place. Not through motivation, not through a surge of inspiration that lasts 3 days before fading, through something more durable than that, through the kind of understanding that changes the way you see yourself permanently. Let's begin. I want to tell you about Elena. Elena was 37 years old when she first admitted to herself, honestly and without defense, that she had been living significantly below her capacity for most of her adult life. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that anyone around her would have recognized or named. Elena was, by every external measure, a person who had her life together. She held a senior position at a company that valued her. She had built relationships that were real and sustaining. She managed her responsibilities with competence, showed up reliably, delivered what was expected of her. But competence, she had begun to realize, was not the same as capacity, and reliability was not the same as potential. There was something else in her. She had always felt it, the way you feel a door in a dark room without being able to see it. Something larger, something more capable, something that occasionally surfaced in moments of genuine challenge or deep focus, showing her a version of herself that was operating at a different level entirely. Sharper, more present, more alive. And then the moment would pass, and she would return to the familiar dimensions of her ordinary days. For years, she had explained this feeling away. She was tired. She was busy. The timing wasn't right. She had responsibilities that came first. She would pursue the bigger things when the conditions were better, when she had more time, more resources, more certainty about which direction to go. But the conditions never fully improved, and the bigger things never quite began. And the feeling of something unlived inside her grew quieter, not because it had gone away, but because she had gotten better at not hearing it. Until the day a colleague, someone Elena respected and trusted, said something in passing that she could not unhear. They were discussing a project that Elena had led, one that had gone well, better than expected, in ways that had surprised even Elena herself. And her colleague looked at her and said, almost as an observation rather than a compliment, "Do you know how different things would look if you operated at that level all the time?" Elena laughed it off in the moment. But that night, sitting alone with the question, something shifted, because the honest answer was, she didn't know. She had never found out. She had been operating at the level that felt safe, that felt sustainable, that felt consistent with the story she carried about who she was and what she was capable of. And somewhere beneath all of that, the full version of her was waiting. Patient, quiet, occasionally glimpsed, entirely unused. What is potential, really? Not the word, the reality behind it. Most people think of potential as a fixed quantity, something you either have or don't have, a measure of maximum capability that exists somewhere in you like a number on a gauge, waiting to be reached. But that's not what it is. Potential is not a ceiling. It is a direction. It is not the maximum of what you can do under perfect conditions. It is the continuous edge of what you choose to attempt, to develop, to bring into existence through sustained effort and honest engagement with the full range of your capability. Which means potential is not something you reach. It is something you practice, something you expand by moving toward it, contracting when you don't, never static, never finished, always responsive to the quality of the engagement you bring to your own life. And here is what that means in practice. The person who consistently operates below their capacity is not just underachieving in some abstract sense. They are actively contracting. Every time you choose the easier version of something you could have done fully, every time you hold back where you could have engaged completely, every time you settle for adequate when excellent was available to you, you're training something. You're reinforcing the habit of less. And habits of less compound exactly the way habits of more do. Just in the opposite direction. Elena had been training the habit of less for years. Not lazily, not carelessly, responsibly even, but below the level that her actual capacity would have supported. And the gap between what she was doing and what she was capable of had been widening quietly, slowly, in a way that daily life made easy not to notice, until it became impossible not to. Let's talk about what actually creates the ceiling, because it is never one thing. It is almost always three things working together, reinforcing each other, creating a structure that feels so solid from the inside that most people never question whether it was built or simply given. The first is inherited belief. Before you were old enough to evaluate what was true about you, other people were already deciding. Parents, teachers, peers, the environment you grew up in, all of it was constantly sending messages about what kind of person you were, what was realistic for someone like you, what you should expect from your efforts in your life. Some of those messages were positive and accurate. Some were limiting and wrong. And most of them were absorbed without any filtering process because you didn't yet have the capacity to filter them. You just took them in and built yourself around them. The beliefs that resulted are not things you chose. They are things that were installed. And the particularly cruel aspect of installed beliefs is that they feel like self-knowledge. They feel like honest, accurate assessments of who you are. They feel like you know your own limits. But knowing your limits and accepting someone else's description of your limits are two very different things. And most people have never clearly distinguished between the two. Elena traced this in herself during a period of genuine reflection that followed her colleague's observation. She could identify, with surprising precision, the sources of her most limiting beliefs. A teacher who had told her, when she was 11, that she was good but not exceptional. A family environment that valued stability over ambition, security over risk. A series of early professional experiences where she had tried to go beyond what was expected and had been subtly but clearly pushed back toward the center. None of it had been malicious. All of it had left marks. And those marks had become the architecture of a ceiling she had been living under for 25 years without ever clearly seeing it. The second ceiling is the fear of judgment. This one is subtler than inherited belief. It operates not in the past, but in the present. Not in what you were told, but in what you imagine others will think. The fear of judgment is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior, and one of the least discussed, because admitting that you are constrained by what others might think feels like weakness. So people don't admit it. They describe their hesitation in other terms. They say they're being realistic, being careful, being responsible. But underneath many of those descriptions, if you're honest enough to look, is the fear of being seen trying and failing, of being visible at the level of your real ambition and falling short of it publicly. of the particular vulnerability that comes with letting people see what you actually want and then not getting it. Because not trying protects you from that. If you never fully extend, you never fully fail. If you keep your real ambitions quiet, you never have to face the gap between them and your results. It is a form of protection, an expensive one, because what it protects you from is not really failure. It is the experience of being fully alive in your own life. Elena recognized this in herself with some discomfort. She had been careful for as long as she could remember about how much she visibly wanted things. There was something in her that had learned to want things quietly, to pursue them modestly, to not make too much of her ambitions in case they were met with skepticism or in case she fell short of them. She had been managing her exposure to judgment by managing how much of herself she put on the line. The cost of that management was that she had never found out what she was actually capable of when she stopped managing and started fully trying. The third ceiling is the most comfortable and therefore the most dangerous. The habit of comfort. The human mind is an efficiency machine. It seeks to do more with less, to reduce friction, to find paths that require minimal energy for acceptable outcomes. And over time, it learns exactly where the edges of acceptable are, and it stays there because staying there is easier than pushing beyond. This is not laziness. It is optimization, the brain doing precisely what it evolved to do. But the brain optimizes for survival, not for potential, for comfort, not for growth, for the maintenance of what is already working, not for the expansion into what could work. And if you let it run without deliberate interruption, it will spend your entire life optimizing you for a smaller and smaller version of yourself. Because comfort compounds. Every time you choose the easier path becomes more automatic next time. Every time you choose rest over effort becomes a little more unfamiliar. Every time you choose the known over the unknown becomes a little more threatening. Until you wake up one day in a life that is perfectly comfortable and entirely too small for what you were capable of. Elena saw this clearly in herself, not in the big decisions where she had been deliberate and thoughtful, but in the daily texture of her choices. The projects she had declined because they felt like too much. The conversations she had avoided because they felt too confrontational. The ideas she had kept to herself because sharing them would have required defending them. Comfort had been quietly carving the dimensions of her life for years, and she had been calling it wisdom. The turning point for Elena did not look like a turning point. It looked like a Tuesday morning. She had been sitting with everything she had been examining, the inherited beliefs, the fear of judgment, the habit of comfort, and she had reached a moment of decision that felt both significant and completely ordinary at the same time. She had been invited to lead a new initiative at work, something larger than what she had done before, something that would require her to operate visibly and at a level she was not entirely certain she could sustain. The kind of thing that, in the past, she would have declined gracefully, with a reasonable explanation that had nothing to do with fear. This time, she said yes. Not because she felt ready. She didn't. Not because the fear had gone away. It hadn't. Not because she was certain she could do it. She wasn't. She said yes because she finally understood something that changed the equation entirely. Readiness is not something that arrives before you begin. It is something that is built by beginning. The version of her that could lead that initiative with confidence and competence did not yet exist. She was going to have to build that version through the process of doing the thing. And the only way to start building it was to stop waiting for it to arrive on its own. That yes, said without certainty, without readiness, without the comfortable feeling of knowing she could handle it, was the first real act of unleashing what had been living inside her for years. It was not dramatic. It was not accompanied by a surge of inspiration or a feeling of sudden clarity. It was just a decision. A small, ordinary, completely unremarkable decision made in a Tuesday morning meeting that changed the direction of everything that came after. What does it mean to become unstoppable? Not in the way the word is often used, as an aspirational abstraction that sounds powerful but means nothing specific. In the actual, lived, daily reality of what that word describes. Because unstoppable does not mean fearless. The people you would describe as unstoppable are not people who stopped feeling fear. They're people who stopped letting fear make their decisions. And unstoppable does not mean invulnerable. It does not mean that nothing affects you, that setbacks roll off you without impact, that you're somehow insulated from the difficulties that are woven into any life of genuine effort. The unstoppable person is hit by those things. They feel them, sometimes deeply. What they don't do is stop. The distinction is everything. Because most people treat the presence of fear or difficulty as information about whether to continue. They interpret the resistance as a signal, a sign that maybe this isn't the right direction, maybe they aren't cut out for this, maybe the effort isn't worth it. The unstoppable person interprets resistance differently, as evidence that something real is being attempted, as confirmation that they are operating at a level that matters, as the natural, expected, unavoidable companion of any pursuit that is worth the effort. They don't try to eliminate the resistance. They expect it. They prepare for it. They develop a relationship with it that is neither avoidant nor consumed by it. They move through it, again and again and again, until moving through it becomes the thing they are most practiced at, until the resistance, which never fully disappears, becomes something that no longer has the power to stop them. That is what Elena was building, not through any single dramatic breakthrough, but through the accumulated practice of continuing when she would previously have stopped, of staying when she would previously have retreated, of engaging fully when she would previously have held back. One decision at a time, one day at a time, one moment of choosing the fuller version of herself over the comfortable one, until the fuller version started to feel like the familiar one. Let's talk about how this actually works in daily life. Because potential is not unleashed in grand moments. It is unleashed in ordinary ones. In a moment when you are in a meeting and you have a thought worth sharing, but the familiar hesitation starts and you speak anyway. In a moment when you're working on something and the easy version would be acceptable, but the full version would be excellent and you choose the full version. In the moment when something doesn't go as planned and the old pattern would be to withdraw and the new pattern is to adjust and continue. In the moment when someone challenges you and instead of collapsing or deflecting, you hold your ground with honesty and without aggression. These are not heroic moments. They do not feel significant when they happen. Nobody is watching. Nobody is keeping score. But you are. Your mind is. And every time you choose the fuller response over the smaller one, something is being built. Something is being trained. A capacity for more is being reinforced, one quiet choice at a time. This is what the daily practice of potential looks like. Not grand gestures, not dramatic reinventions. The consistent, daily, unglamorous choice to be more fully yourself than the situation strictly requires. Elena found this, not in the big project she had agreed to lead, though that was important, in the texture of every day within that project, in the choices so small they barely registered as choices at all. The email she rewrote to say what she actually thought instead of the diplomatic version that said less. The meeting where she pushed back on an assumption everyone else seemed comfortable with. The afternoon when the work was hard and she stayed with it instead of finding a reason to step away. Each one invisible, each one a vote, each one adding to the accumulation that was slowly and then quickly becoming a different person. There's a cost to unused potential that most people never fully account for. Not the external cost, not the career that didn't advance, the project that didn't get built, the version of your life that didn't materialize. Those costs are real, but they're visible enough that people at least partially recognize them. The hidden cost is internal, and it is heavier. When you consistently operate below your capacity, something happens that is difficult to describe but easy to feel. A quiet dissatisfaction that has no clean explanation. A restlessness that comfort cannot resolve. A sense that something is wrong without being able to name what it is. Because what is wrong is not your circumstances. What is wrong is the distance between who you are and who you are capable of being. And that distance, lived in daily over months and years, accumulates into something that starts to look like unhappiness, but is actually something more specific. Is the feeling of being unfaithful to yourself. Not dramatically, not in a way that produces guilt or crisis. Just a low, persistent sense of something unmet, something owed to yourself that you have not been paying. People try to resolve this feeling in all kinds of ways. They change jobs, change relationships, change cities. They pursue new hobbies and new goals and new sources of stimulation. And sometimes those changes help, briefly, because novelty can temporarily quiet the feeling. But if the ceiling comes with you, the feeling comes too. Because the feeling is not about the circumstances. It is about the gap. And the gap follows you wherever you go until you close it. The only resolution is to start living at the level of your actual capacity. Not perfectly, not all at once, but directionally. Moving toward the fuller version instead of away from it. Closing the gap instead of relocating it. Elena understood this. She had spent years trying to resolve the feeling externally, with new goals and new plans that still operated within the same ceiling. And the feeling had persisted because she was rearranging the furniture inside a room she needed to leave. The moment she started moving toward her actual capacity, the feeling began to change. Not because everything got easier, not because she stopped failing or struggling or feeling uncertain, but because the gap was closing, because she was finally paying the debt she owed herself. And that, it turned out, was the only currency the feeling would accept. Let's talk about the environment you build around yourself as you do this work. Because unleashing your potential is not a solo endeavor. The people you spend time with, the conversations you participate in, the voices you allow consistent access to your mind, all of it shapes the ceiling more than most people realize. Think about the people in your life who are operating at the level you want to reach. Not the ones who talk about it, the ones who are actually doing it, who are living in the expanded version of themselves, who have pushed through their own ceilings and are building something real on the other side. How much time do you spend with them? And think about the people who are comfortable where they are, who have made peace with the smaller version, who have built a life around the ceiling, and who, perhaps without meaning to, communicate that the ceiling is reasonable, that where they are is where people like you belong. How much time do you spend with them? Because the standards of the people around you become the water you swim in. Their ceilings become your reference points. Their relationship with their own potential shapes your sense of what is normal, what is achievable, what is worth attempting. This does not mean abandoning the people you love who are not operating at full capacity. It means being intentional about whose voice has authority over your sense of what is possible. It means seeking out deliberately and consistently the company of people who are living proof that the ceiling is not fixed. Elena made this shift, not dramatically, not by cutting people off, but by intentionally expanding her circle toward people who were operating at the level she was trying to reach, who were building things that scared them, who had made peace with discomfort as the price of growth. And what she found was that proximity to that kind of person changed something in her. Not through advice or mentorship, but through exposure. Through the simple, powerful experience of being around people for whom the fuller version was the normal one. Their ceiling became her reference point, and her ceiling rose to meet it. There is something I want to say about the relationship between potential and failure, because you cannot talk honestly about unleashing your maximum potential without talking about what happens when you extend fully and fall short. And if you're going to become unstoppable, you need a relationship with failure that is different from the one most people carry. Most people treat failure as evidence, as information about their limits, as proof that the thing they were attempting was beyond them, and they use that evidence to justify returning to the ceiling, to the smaller dimensions, to the version of themselves that doesn't risk this kind of outcome. But failure is not evidence of limits. It is evidence of attempt. An attempt is the only mechanism through which potential is developed. You cannot grow what you do not use. You cannot expand what you never extend. Every failure at something you genuinely tried is a step in the construction of the capacity to eventually succeed at it. Every time you fall short while fully engaged, you are developing something that partial engagement never builds. The person who never fails has never truly tried. And the person who never truly tries has no idea what they are capable of. They have protected their ego at the cost of their development. And the protection, however comfortable, is a much greater loss than any single failure could have been. Elena failed at parts of the project she had agreed to lead. Not catastrophically, not in ways that undid the progress, but genuinely. There were things she attempted that didn't work. Approaches she tried that had to be abandoned. Moments where she overestimated what she could deliver and had to recalibrate. And for the first time in her life, she did not use those failures to justify retreat. She used them to adjust. She stayed. She learned. She tried differently. And the capacity she was building through that process, the capacity to stay engaged through failure without being destroyed by it, was more valuable than any single success could have been. Because that capacity was hers permanently now. No outcome could take it away. It was built into who she was. I want to leave you with something that Elena understood by the end of that year, something that she described not as an insight, but as a shift in how she saw everything. She said that the difference between the person she had been and the person she was becoming was not in what she could do. It had never been in what she could do. She had always had the capability. The difference was in what she was willing to let herself be. That is the center of everything. Your potential is not a hidden resource that needs to be discovered. It is not something outside of you that needs to be unlocked by the right circumstances or the right mentor or the right moment. It is already in you. It has always been in you. The full, expanded, capable version of yourself that you have glimpsed in moments of genuine engagement, that you have felt as a pull towards something larger, that you have recognized even when you couldn't name it. That version is not a destination. It is not something you arrive at after enough growth or enough work or enough time. It is a choice, made now, in this moment, and again in the next one. The choice to stop organizing your life around the ceiling, to stop treating the comfortable version of yourself as the full version, to stop waiting for readiness that was never going to arrive on its own, to begin, not perfectly, not with certainty, not with the fear gone or the doubt resolved or the conditions finally right. Just begin with what you have, for where you are, at the level of engagement that your full capacity deserves, even before you fully feel it. Because the feeling follows the doing. The confidence follows the commitment. The unstoppable version of you is not waiting for something to happen. It is waiting for you to decide. And that decision is always, only ever, yours. Not tomorrow. Not when things calm down. Not when you feel ready. Now. Because the only ceiling that was ever real was the one you agreed to live beneath. And you can stop agreeing at any moment. This one will do. If this video moves something in you, if something you heard today made you stop and think, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this and subscribe to the channel. There is so much more to explore together. See you in the next one.